Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. I don't know if you realize, but I've switched my time when I release the shows from early in the morning to evening. That way, if something happens the next day, I can pick up and actually give you updates of the things that are occurring. So from now on, the show will release somewhere between 7 and 9 in the evening, and will repeat the next day. So with that, let me give you your tasking. I want you to go look up Yuri Bezmenov. So the way you spell it is Y-U-R-I, Yuri Bezmenov, B-E-Z-M-E-N-O-V. Look him up on YouTube, and there's several different videos. One of them is over an hour long, and you'll find out who he is and why what he said is so important. He's now dead. He's passed away. But I want you to listen to what he has to say and then compare it to what's happening now and realize it's happening immediately in real time, faster than you think right now. And let's start the show. This is Jonathan Gilliam back on the Experts Podcast. The truth has arrived. So, as I was just saying there in the beginning of the show, Yuri Bezmenov is somebody that you need to understand what he was saying. You need to go and know who this guy is. Go to YouTube and look it up and listen to what he has to say. And then if you have questions, you can reach out to me on Twitter, @JGilliam_seal, or on Facebook, YouTube, and also on Instagram. Although I really am still kind of puzzled as to what Instagram is besides a narcissistic platform for most people. But you can reach out to me and let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see if I can answer them. But the reality of he's gone, long gone, and you'll understand who he is and the importance of who he was. He was born in 1939, died in 1993. He's been gone for a while now, and I've talked about him on this show before, but I don't want to give you too much away because I want you to go research the guy. That's the whole point of these taskings that I do, is that you'll be able to go and research and get used to actually looking into things, not just taking my word for it or anybody else's word for it, for that matter. Now, as I went through the news today in preparation for the show, there's different things that, again, as I see, I'm looking at the headlines beyond the headlines. I'm looking for the story beyond the headlines. And when I look at one thing that's really bothered me, and I know it's bothering other law enforcement and people in general, is the fact that there's been basically the response to these protesters, by and large, has been from a perspective of protecting federal buildings. So when I'm talking about Portland and things like that, where the left is trying to burn down these federal buildings or attack federal agents, or in many cases kill cops and law enforcement, their response is, it's very neutered and very political. And when I was listening earlier to DHS Secretary Chad Wolf and his response to Judge Janine when she was questioning him about what their response is about what they're doing. I'm pulling up the video right now as we speak. You always know when I get delayed and when I'm answering something or saying something, it's because my brain is trying to do two things at once. Although I have learned from being on the radio and doing all these shows all these years that my brain can actually do multiple things at the same time. Well, anyway, getting back to what I was saying, I'm going to play part of this video. You'll get to hear the audio, and I'm going to play this, and you're going to see, and I'm going to explain to you why this bothers me so much. It started, not that the realization just happened, right? But the realization of these people that are in office and the people that orbit around them has always been troubling to me. But I have to say that it culminated when I looked at the reality of who is in charge of the Reagan Foundation. You know, the CEO of that is the editor and the CEO of the Washington Post. And what bothers me is not just that, you know, he works in those two areas, you know, the staunch conservative Republican Ronald Reagan's foundation and the highly leftist anti-Trump socialist communist Washington Post. That is already troubling enough. But this guy was actually one of the chiefs of staff for Ronald Reagan when he was president. And I talked about this on a prior show. I started looking into this more. And there's some things that are very troubling about this pattern. Now, I don't know Chad Wolf, but I do know that the one thing I can criticize President Trump on, remember, I'm a huge Trump supporter. I was supporting him on Hannity's radio show long before Sean Hannity was publicly supporting him. I was saying we should bring Trump in. He's got operational experience. None of these other people that are running for president have any operational experience. They've just been politicians. So I was saying that long before anybody else was in 2015, 2016. But my criticism of the president is that he has failed to go outside of the swamp to pick people to work for him. I don't know Chad Wolf. I know I can look at his resume and he's swampy. I go and I'm going to tell you what his resume is. It's very simple. Even his resume on the DHS official site it doesn't really say anything about the guy. I mean, why? Because there's not a whole lot to say about Chad Wolf. He is very limited in his experience. It says he has over 20 years of policy. But let me ask you something, folks, okay? I want you to think very seriously about this. If you've been in the military or you've worked in the corporate world or whatever you've done, how often do you see people in charge that never, I mean, in the movies, this is the case, you know, where you have somebody who, you know, whose dad owns the company. And so they take on a role, but in the real world, somebody's not going to take on a role, even if it's a family business, unless they know the business, right? And they're experts in that business. They worked in that business their whole life. Otherwise it's destined to fail. But when we look at government, those of you that have worked in government and law enforcement or in the military or in some other agency, you know that people at upper management, right? We're talking about the supervisors and on up. They have made a career in that agency primarily, right? They've actually been, although many of them, especially in the FBI, they learn in 10 years how to get to an executive level where they're making a lot of money and they really have little to no experience a lot of the times. That's the way it works. But they're still brought up in the FBI. They went through the FBI Academy. They, you know, you can look at their resume and on paper, at least it says, you know, 20 years or 15 years as an FBI agent involved in this many investigations and, you know, yada, 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 this many surveillances or hours of surveillance, whatever. When you look at Chad Wolf, and again, I don't know the guy. The reason I'm bringing this up is because of the response that he gives, which I'm going to play for you in just a second. But before I play it, I want to tell you about his resume because I want you to understand. I did a show a couple of weeks ago where I had Brett Baer's interview with Christopher Wray, the FBI director, who's never been an FBI agent, right? He is a swamp orbiting entity, just like all the rest of these people. They get up in DC and they'll go from private back into public service, back and forth, back and forth. You see that a lot with intelligence executives and things like Boeing or something like that. They'll bounce back and forth. When I look at Chad Wolf, I look at somebody who has no experience to be where he's at. I mean, he's relatively young. He was born in 1976, right? So he's relatively young. He has a bachelor's degree from Southern Methodist University and something else from Villanova University, but that's it. was in the military. He wasn't in law enforcement. He didn't work in an agency. He never worked in intelligence or on the border with Border Patrol. He never worked the street as a cop. I mean, this guy, there's no training and experience here that would give him the knowledge to run the Department of Homeland Security or TSA, which he seems to be locked into these things somehow, some way. There's definitely not enough knowledge here for this guy to be in the position that he's in under President Trump. But like I was saying, the president, I've said this before about him, and again, I'm a supporter of the president, but these are my critiques, okay? He loves shiny, expensive things. So if you say, I'm thirsty, I want a cup of water, I just got through walking, it's hot outside, or I just got through playing golf, somebody says, well, I have a beer, or, here's a solo cup full of water, cold water, you say, give me that, and you'll drink it, right? Because you're thirsty, you want water. The president's mindset is, they'll say, here's a cup of water, and then here's another cup of water made of the finest crystal. Well, he's going to choose that one to drink out of because that's the kind of guy he is. He likes the nicest things. And I don't know if anybody has ever told him or if it's dawned on him that these orbiting DCites, the swamp people, are not the crystal, right? You don't want the crystal because it's fake. These people, it's not real crystal, right? If you really want to have great leadership in government, you need to take things that are reliable. And you need to take things that you need to take people who understand what the agency in which they're working. And so many of these people, I look at the resumes throughout Washington, D.C. You can look at Barack Obama is really the perfect example of this. I mean, this guy has a resume before president that was high school, college, government. And you have to understand, being a congressman or a senator without anything else in your background, and that's why I always tell young people, they're like, I'm running for office. I say, well, go join the military, get some experience in life, and then get back to me, or become an attorney and actually work as an attorney for a while, learn how the law works, what's bad and what's good about it. Then get back with me and I'll support you if you run for office. This 26-year-old Laura Loomer stuff, I don't agree with that at all because there's no experience behind that. You don't just throw somebody up because they're good at getting clicks on social media. But really, to tell you the truth, somebody like Chad Wolf or Barack Obama, who was over his head as president, it's the same thing. These people are not qualified to be in the positions that they're at, and that's why nothing gets done. But getting back to Chad Wolf, I don't know how he got to the position he's at. He literally went to high school, to college, and then after that, he worked as a staffer for Republican Senators Phil Gramm, Kay Bailey Hutchison, and Chuck Hagel. And he did that for, like several years he did that, right? And then from 2002 to 2005, he worked in the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, becoming an assistant administrator for transportation security policy. I mean, how are you making policy if you've never worked in the field in these environments? It's all political. All political. This guy is as swampy Republican as you can get. Right? So from there, he goes to a lobbying firm. Right? And from that, they're no longer around. From there, he went and got his master's certificate in government contract management from Villanova. That's where I was saying he did something else at Villanova. But he went from there and became the chief of staff of TSA. How does that happen? How does one go from college to being a staffer for Republican senators to a policy wonk in the TSA, do a short stint as a lobbyist, and then all of a sudden you were a chief of staff of one of the biggest or a part of the biggest bureaucracy in the government? I don't trust this at all. He went from there. He became chief of staff in 2018. Undersecretary, let's see here. In 2018, he became chief of staff of DHS undersecretary. So he became chief of staff of the undersecretary of DHS. And he was one of the early architects of the family separation policy. See, these are where the problems come from. Okay. This is what bothers me, is that people are making policy that are not ground pounders. They're not out there. They don't understand the reality of what's going on. Sometimes they get it right and it's a good policy. But most often it's not fully thought through. The policy is not all the way thought through, right? And then from there, he becomes the Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security for Strategy, Plans, Analysis, and Risk, right? He just keeps getting put in these high-level positions and a senior executive service position, not subject to Senate confirmation. So there you go, okay? He became an SESer in around 2018, 2019. Well, it had to be 2018 because February 2019, let's see. No, that was, okay, there it is. February 8th, 2019, November 13th, 2019, he was Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security for Strategy, Plans, Analysis, and Risk, and an SESer at that level. Then November 13th, 2019, became the Undersecretary of Homeland Security for the same office, Strategy, Policy, and Plans, which is a little bit different, I guess. And then he became immediately the acting Secretary of Homeland Security. I've never heard of someone rising through the ranks like this without ever paying the dues or understanding where they're at from a lower level that was worth anything. They're just swamp. That's all. If you want to know what swamp is, this is what it is. We are here, and then we choose who comes up to here. This is very, very troubling for me. And then when you listen to what he says here, let's see if I can get this to play.
Well, I think it's very concerning and very dangerous, again, when we put politics over public safety. And a lot of the
Okay, so he says that immediately. He's talking about the Democrat convention. He's talking also a little bit about Portland. But immediately he says it's very dangerous to put politics over policy.
Debate that we're having regarding law enforcement, really tying the hands of law enforcement is concerning. You certainly see that in Milwaukee, but you see that in other cities as well. So when we talk about less than lethal munitions, it's a critical part of what law enforcement does. That is actually trying to de-escalate the situation.
Why is he so concerned about de-escalating this situation? I'll tell you why. Because he's a politician's right-hand man. He is somebody that he's trying to de-escalate it. So in order to appease the left, basically, so that the president can get reelected. Again, I understand politics. Okay. But the problem is he's not effective at doing the job that he is hired to do. He is not a true leader in DHS. He is a policy wonk. He is somebody who that is all he's done has been in policy and handed from one executive level to the next. That's it. So when he advises the president, it's pretty much all wrong. Now, I'm not saying we should go all the way out. I did a meme yesterday saying, showing these weirdos in Portland using the lasers, and they've literally blinded I think a total of 3, maybe more, of these federal agents that are up there by hitting them in the face, in the eyes with these lasers. Very dangerous. And the use of force, of deadly force policy in the federal government and approved by the Supreme Court, which I talked about yesterday, is if there is an imminent threat of loss of life or serious bodily injury, you can use lethal force. The reason why these protests are getting more and more violent, we've now seen IEDs. They've caught people who've shown up with weapons. There's been shootings where, unfortunately for us, they only shot each other. The I don't know if this guy understands the reality of how law enforcement works. And remember, I've spoken out against law enforcement going beyond what they're there to do, but this is definitely a category where I agree that they should be working. Because we're seeing them used across the United States, for instance, where they're being used in New York City to set up roadblocks and monitor people who are coming in, as though people coming in here are responsible for all the people dying in New York City. They're not. They're all these people that died in New York City are dead because of Cuomo and his murderous, which I mention every night, his murderous executive orders to put COVID positive patients in with elderly people. You don't see that now anywhere. You don't see this massive amount of death and massive amount of cases. You see massive amount of cases and not very much death. Why? Because the death numbers are not there, because idiotic governors are not putting positive patients in elderly clinics. That's basically it. So when I look at somebody like Chad Wolf and what he's saying, he is speaking politics. He is doing the exact thing that he started off the interview talking about, what is bad, putting politics over policy. These officers need to be more aggressive, and there needs to be more of them there, or they just need to get out of the way and let the people do what needs to be done, which is get rid of these people that are tearing up the cities, killing freedom of speech, injuring the Second Amendment. And many of these people, like for instance in Missouri now, are won primaries and are going to go up for the election. These same leftist people are starting to inundate Congress. Let me play some more of this, Chad Wolf.
For officer safety as well. And so when there are police departments out there that prohibit that use, you're putting law enforcement officers in danger, but you're also putting the public that they serve in danger as well. So we want to make sure that we have all the tools for law enforcement to use, particularly in Milwaukee, but elsewhere.
Can you tell me, Chad Wolf, what those tools are and why they would be used and when you should go beyond those tools? Can you tell me that from an experience level, Chad Wolf? No, you cannot. You probably can read that, but do you fully understand that? I don't think you do, and I think it shows around this nation that you and no one else is advising the president, at least not to the point that I can see, about the fact that this is insurrection. And if my investigative insight is correct, I would bet that you're telling the president not to look at this as insurrection, not to say these things, because for a political wonk, we don't want to start anything. You're not going to get reelected. But people like Chad Wolf will always be around, but that's what they do. They go in, they get in these positions. They either narcissistically believe that they know more than they do, or, as we have seen, and I started to describe at the beginning of the show, like the guy who's the CEO. I'm not mentioning his name for a reason because I'm not going to give him any props. But he's the CEO of the Washington Post, was also the chief of staff for Ronald Reagan. Perhaps a lot of times that's who they really are. Like I described yesterday, they're slow movers for the left, the Bushes, many of his appointees. They move slowly, but they're still leftists. They're still swampers. Let me go on here.
But at the end of the day, when we talk about the DNC that's taking place in Milwaukee, the federal government will be there. It is.
Why? Because, as he's going to say right here,
a national security event.
It's a national security event. Well, listen, if we were looking at this from reality's point of view, that the Democrat Party has full on accepted the foundation of the Communist Party, of globalists, and that they are dead set because they have shown that they have a radical leftist viewpoint, and policy-wise, they're going to change things that are going to greatly injure this country. We are literally the same policy I just told you about that could allow a federal agent to kill someone. That is actually happening to the Constitution, to the nation. An imminent threat of loss of life or serious bodily injury. Because if you think that Cuomo and these other leftist governors are the only ones that are going to react the way that they do, telling you what you can eat, monitoring where you travel, in California, in LA, if you have a party and they find out about it, they're going to shut your water and your electricity off. They literally said they are going to try to push people and companies out of LA if they have parties. If you think that that's the only people that are going to be doing this, trust me, if the left, the Democrat Party, wins the presidency and gets the Senate and keeps the House, this country will move faster to that point. You will not be traveling freely. It's not going to be, hey, I'm going to go to Nevada for a vacation from Arkansas. You're not going to go to Nevada freely. Things are going to get locked down. Businesses are going to fold. Poverty will just go out of proportion because these people believe that, like so did the communists in many other places, they believe that if they break the economy, that they will break the people. The problem is they count on being able to bring the economy back for themselves, and quite frankly, that just typically doesn't happen because they take it too far. That's what's happening now. So when I listen to Chad Wolf and what he's saying, it doesn't add up. It's political speech. I've heard this my entire career. I don't care if it was in the SEAL teams from the upper echelons or if it was in the Air Marshals, the most incompetent place I ever worked, which was part of the TSA at the time, or whether it is in the FBI. The only place I really worked where that wasn't the case was with a bunch of SEALs when we were contractors. We did what was most effective, and it was unbelievable the way it worked. Let's keep going on this.
So there will be a heavy federal presence there, and we're going to make sure that those venues are secure, as we do in a number of other situations around the country every day.
But no one, okay, he's just concerned with securing these locations. Do they not realize that they are protecting a group of people that want to overthrow the country, and they are literally giving them safe passage to coordinate even further? And protection. I don't know if they realize this or not, or if they do, and this is part of the plan. I don't know.
All right. I understand that there are over 9,000 federal facilities in the United States. Do you expect to see more Portlands?
Well, we hope not.
So that's your answer. We hope not. How about no? See, here's the difference between an operator and somebody who's never operated, okay? If they had an operator at the top that understood the reality of the force that's under DHS, the director of DHS, it's a massive force. Combined with the FBI, the DEA, and all these other ATF and other federal agencies, he literally could answer that question, no. They will not do this anywhere else. In fact, it's going to stop in Portland today. But he's not going to answer it like that because he's a politician. He's a political policy guy. He's never done anything operational, and he has no clue about what I just described. None.
See across the country is a good partnership with state and local law enforcement. But what we will do...
Again, I've been a part of those partnerships. You know what it comes down to then? Look at the FBI and the NYPD. Look at what's happening in New York City, right? With the ridiculous, idiotic commissioner of the NYPD and how he bends over, not backwards, he's bending over forward for the mayor, de Blasio, and the governor, Cuomo. He bends over and they throttle him and they handle him to where he's handling the NYPD to do their bidding. Right? Well, that is the way the NYPD treated the FBI. You'll do what we say, you get out of our way. I've seen multiple times when the NYPD, because they pushed and shoved and had this partnership, were a part of an interview with some pretty bad guys, and then they turn around and leak the information saying that they collected it when they didn't. This happened all the time with the NYPD. Now, I worked with some incredible guys. Every partner I had in the Bureau was an NYPD detective, multiple detectives, and I love them. They taught me a tremendous amount about law enforcement and surveillance and how to, the difference between being a SEAL and being in the street, in the city, policing or investigating American citizens. It's a lot different. And I learned a tremendous amount from them. But what I also learned from the NYPD is that their executives are a bunch of blowhards who are politically minded, and this partnership that happens, and it happens all over the country like this, is only as good as the politics allow it to be. The reality is these partnerships are crap in most places. And that's what he says he's relying on.
What we continue to do and what we have done over the past several weeks is if we get specific threat, specific intelligence that a federal facility is being targeted, we're going to make sure that we have the resources there.
Okay, first of all, it's resources, not racehorses, genius. But this is the problem, is that I remember when I was running the special events unit for the New York office of the FBI, right? And you think special events is like, oh, we're planning parties. That's not what it was. I did the threat assessments, whatever big event there was going to be. Macy's Day Parade, Times Square for New Year's, the tree lighting at Rockefeller Center, all these different events. And then there were smaller events. Glenn Beck's first live broadcast in Times Square for the Blaze. You know, where there was threats to that. I would look at these things. I would do a threat assessment. I would put them in a matrix where I would decide, is this a small venue, high threat, a large venue, high threat, large venue, medium threat, whatever you would have. Fashion Week, for instance, not a huge threat to Fashion Week, but it's in New York City, which is a huge target. It's a big event where people congregate. That makes it a big target. But overall, besides PETA, or animal rights liberation people who don't typically go out and kill, they definitely threatened Fashion Week, and they did react in years prior where they poured fake blood on people and ruined, lots of money as far as like these furs and things. But there was an imminent threat of loss of life or serious bodily injury. However, anywhere in New York at any time, there is a threat from fundamental Islam that they are going to kill people. So to say, which I've heard numerous times after I did the threat assessments, made out the operations orders, I see a public statement by NYPD or FBI saying, or the mayor's office saying, there's no known threat at this time. Well, no known specific threat where they say, yes, I'm going to hit that particular target. But there's always a perceived threat in New York. Always. Why do you think the Sarnoff brothers, after they got through attacking Boston, were making their way down to Manhattan to Times Square? Because it's always a target. So whenever you hear a political wonk say there's no known threat, or we're going to, in this case, he said, we're going to listen and we're going to scrub our intel. And if there's a known threat to a certain building, then we're going to act. And that, so what you're hearing there is somebody tell you that they have no plan in place, right? There's no plan. And that basically, if they start attacking the building, they will react to it. And as we can see, it's not like they're reacting in a way as to stop anything. So that's how that works. That's why that speech is so just infuriating to me. I'm going to go back 15, 20 seconds. I'm going to let that play again.
That facility, along with over the past several weeks, is if we get specific threat, specific intelligence that a federal facility is being targeted, we're going to make sure that we have the resources there to protect that facility along with state and local law enforcement.
Well, we know that's not the case. In Portland, they won't allow their police to get involved. So we know that that's not the case. It's not going to be the case in every place there, Mr. Wolf. You're going to have locations where they say, nope, we're not going to put our people out there to assist you. And we know that you are not good at predicting where this is going to happen, because why? How do we know that? It keeps happening. It keeps happening, and you're 100% responsive, not proactive, not action. You are all reaction. That's why we're in the position that we're in. Nobody will name the enemy. Nobody tries to forward think it and be proactive and go out and hunt these criminals. We have stopped hunting bad people.
We've done that in Seattle recently, and we continue to do that.
No, you didn't do anything in Seattle. They occupied a complete neighborhood where people did not ask them to come in. They then declared themselves an autonomous society from the government, and you didn't do anything. Nothing. Their law enforcement eventually went in and stopped it. Whereas the federal government, as soon as they declare themselves an entity outside of the government, you should have been in there. I don't care what you had to do to get rid of those people. And I'm not a radical person. I'm not some tinfoil hat guy. But if you allow a group in Seattle to do what they did, it is going to affect other people who are anarchists, who are communists, and who want to overthrow this government. You did nothing to stop that or to curb that ideology? Nothing.
In other cities, when we get specific information, and of course we're still in Portland, I want to make sure that folks understand that DHS will remain in Portland until we can be assured that that courthouse is safe and secure night after night.
How are you going to, okay, you're going to remain in Portland, right? That's no different than me hanging out front of a hospital. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going in there and stopping any cancer. Just being there doesn't do a thing. As you can see, they've been burning the place down. They're eventually going to burn it down. They're eventually going to burn it down. What was the other thing that he said here?
And of course, we're still in Portland. I want to make sure that folks understand that DHS will remain in Portland until we can be assured that that courthouse is safe and secure night after night.
How are you going to assure that? You're going to wait until their law enforcement finally does something? You see, folks, this is why the country is in the problem that it's in, because this is called punting the football. This is exactly the same tactic that the left overtly uses. Let's not, they make small incremental changes. Remember I was talking about yesterday, the difference between the speed of the old left and the new left. The new left just going crazy to the left. The old left went slowly, small changes, and it went right under people's noses that they were doing this. This guy, Wolf, and the way that he leads is exactly the way that all these other executives I've ever worked under, the way that they led, is that they had this political speech that amounts to nothing. It amounts to nothing. Nothing that he just said right there amounts to any type of change. It's not going to protect the buildings. It's not going to force the people back. It's not going to stop this insurrection that's happening. And isn't that the real problem? Yes, it is. The fact that people want to overthrow this country, the fact that they are actually taking action and injuring law enforcement officers, and in some cases, killing them. And I don't care if it's the Boogaloo Boys or if it's Antifa or just freaking useful idiots out there. They all want to overthrow the government. They're all separatists, and they don't care about you. They don't care about your safety. They want either other people to come in and rule the way they want it to happen, or they don't want any government at all. And that's their whole, utopia type of ideology. And guys like this Wolf guy get under my skin so bad because of this political nonsense speech. He shouldn't be anywhere around a leadership position. He has no experience to be in this position.
That is our charge. The Federal Protective Service, as you indicated, protects over almost 9,000 facilities, and they will continue to protect the federal courthouse. And
obviously, they're not protecting anything. I mean, they just simply are standing there with guns, and so these people won't move forward. But it's not like they're stopping them from reaching. There are a lot of these buildings would have already burned around the country. If Antifa and these idiots had any brains about them whatsoever, they would forget about Portland. They would start hitting all these other places, because some of these courthouses, it's not like they're big old marble-looking buildings. Now, I hope they don't do that. But that's what I'm saying. You can't wait for these people to show up and then decide how you're going to react to it, because trust me on this. If Wolf has his way, there's going to be a lot of rhetoric. They're going to stand out there and shoot beanbags, and that's it. They're not going to do anything. Officers could get killed. They're not going to react. There's been federal officers killed by these people. What do? They go out, they send state people out there. They enforce an arrest on this guy, and they get killed.
Portland, as they have since 1997.
All right.
Worthless. Absolutely worthless. The judge mentioned something in the beginning of that interview. I didn't play that part, where she's talking about the Marquis of Queensberry rules and how it seems like that's the way we're fighting these individuals. And I really, to tell you the truth, I didn't know what that was. I used to box a little bit, but I didn't know that particular term. But that's really the Marquis of Queensberry rules, also known as the Queensberry rules, are a code of general accepted rules in the sport of boxing, right? So it's a set of rules that makes boxing fair, okay? It makes it not gentlemanly, but makes it what's the word? Civilized, right? That is this is a sport, okay? But you look at warfare back in the days of the Revolution, where they used to line up, face each other, and then civilly shoot at each other, okay? That went out with guerrilla warfare, and quite frankly, that was the dumbest way of warfare. I don't know who came up with, what snob, nasty, freaking imbecile came up with that, but those are tactics that just got people killed, basically, more than anything. But that's the way they're fighting this now. They're basically, all they do is they appease the opposition that's coming up against them, like Antifa or these people, with rhetoric and with less than lethal munitions or tactics, whatever you want to call it. All the while, trust me, it's escalating. There have been cops been killed. There will be more that get killed. And eventually, what's going to happen is a group of these weirdos on the left are going to say, let's go for it. They're going to have a dozen guns, and they're just going to massacre law enforcement or whoever's there. And the worst part about this is if the people, the civilized people, the ones that have sworn an oath to this country, former law enforcement or active law enforcement, former and current military that say enough is enough, if they stepped up to the plate, those same cops that are being shot at by the left would immediately go after and arrest the people who showed up to stop what they're doing, to stop what the left is doing. That's how crazy we've gotten. The same cops that sit at home every night and say, this is bullshit. What's happening in this country and the left and yada, yada, yada. They're the ones who are out there right now at George Washington Bridge or in the tunnels here in New York City. And they're the ones who are stopping people and telling them, you will fill out a form, or if you're getting off the airplane, you will fill out this form. You will be contact traced. If you don't go in quarantine, you're going to be fined $10,000, put in jail. They're the same ones that told Ted Nugent to get back on the plane and fly out of here or else, because the governor told them to do that. They are the same ones that sit at home and complain about what the left, or they say on CNN and this and that. They're going out and they're being the henchmen of these governors and these mayors and these attorney generals. The attorney general here in New York City, okay, or in New York, and the attorney general in Washington, D.C. have all filed suit against the NRA. Actually, tell you what, let's take a break. I'm going to come back and tell you about that in just a minute. Now, I know you guys hear me talk about my books all the time on this show, but I have to tell you, if you have not ordered Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, right now is the time when you should be doing that. Honestly, look around. Is anything getting safer in this country? I don't think so. And you need to start taking responsibility for your safety. You may not have law enforcement showing up at your place. So now is the time when you need to assess your threats. Now, the way you do that, the way you assess your threats, is you read Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and you apply what I teach you in that book. The first half of the book is set up to show you how attackers look at you, why they would attack, who would attack, when it would happen, where it would happen, and how it would be carried out. You divide your life into sectors, and basically, it's not rocket science. You look at yourself from their point of view. I just show you how they do it. The second half of the book shows you how to take what you've learned and then build better defenses, awareness, plans of action, and strategies to mitigate these threats of attack. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. There's 2 workbooks that go with it that you can order after that and actually apply it. Workbook number 1 is the Threat Assessment Workbook, and workbook number 2 is the Defense Assessment Workbook. So they go right along with the book. The first one is like the first half of Sheep No More. The second one is like the second half. And then, because I just didn't think that was enough for you to secure your home, I came up with a children's book with Danielle Kreiner, who did the illustration of it. We put safety, communication, and awareness lessons all in the pictures. It's called The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. And why is it a parent's book for children? Because you go to teamlittlebigs.com and get the lesson plans, hand the book of pictures to your child, and then you teach them 2 to 8 on awareness, communication, and safety. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 workbooks, and The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. This is how you secure your homeland. Okay, so this thing about the NRA, there's 2 things, there's 2 sides of this that I want to point out, okay? One is that the Attorney General of New York, and if you haven't read this in the news, the NRA is now countersuing because the New York Attorney General is seeking to disband the organization. That's what the headline says, okay? Now, when I look at the story and I look at what the Attorney General says, I don't know. There might be some, I'm not backing them, so don't think that I am. I'm not left, and I'm not some kind of freaking operative for the left. I'm just saying, I have never trusted Wayne LaPierre. I don't know him, never met him, but there's something about the NRA, to me, it's very similar to the VFW, for instance. I was a member of the VFW, but what do? The VFW, to my knowledge, doesn't do anything. I know when they had floods in West Virginia, good buddy of mine was a chaplain at the VFW there in one of these locations. Tried to get in touch with the national division or the overall of the NRA, and they did very little. Excuse me, NRA, the VFW. They did very little to help out. There's been other times when I've heard of people approaching the VFW. Will you help sponsor this so we can get? No, they don't do it. But yet they pay their people, their executives, a lot of money, and they're basically a lobbying firm, and so they pay people to lobby. And it's the same thing with the NRA. The NRA had a great training side. That stuff has been diluted, yet the lobbying side has continued to grow in strength. One thing that bothers me about that is the fact that, and I've never joined the NRA for this reason, not because I'm not saying that you shouldn't join the NRA, but I wanted to be able to go on television and radio, and when people assume that I'm the NRA and you're a Second Amendment guy, you're a Republican, you must be NRA, I like to be able to say, nope, I'm not a member of the NRA. Okay, I'm not. So I can't vouch for what the NRA says. I can't say they said this or I agree with them this way or that way. I've purposely stayed separate from the NRA so I could be a stronger voice for the Second Amendment. But there's something about the NRA that's always bothered me, like I said with the VFW, where I see a lot of people keeping themselves viable, right? The fight against these Second Amendment enemies that in Congress and in politics that are in New York City where they have injured the Second Amendment, I really don't see the NRA doing a whole lot in lobbying except getting politicians elected on the Republican Party. That's really it. It runs like a pack for the Republican Party, and they pay themselves very well. LaPierre makes a lot of money. The executives at NRA make a lot of money, and I don't really see them doing a whole lot for the Second Amendment. I truly believe that if the people in this country that are gun owners were more organized, there would be no need for the NRA, because our voice would be so strong that we would say, this is the way it is, or else. You see, this is the problem. When you resign yourself over to somebody else doing it for you, you lose your power as the people. So with that being said, okay, regardless of whether I agree with them or if I feel it's a little wonky the way the NRA is ran, what really bothers me is what the Attorney General of New York said. And it was a little response that she had in the comments. And let me find exactly the words here. She says, "We are seeking to dissolve the NRA." That's troubling to me in the beginning, because even though I think these executives are a little wonky, the NRA stands for the Second Amendment, and anything that the left can do right now to degrade the Second Amendment, they will do it because they know a fight's coming most likely. They know it's the real possibility of it right now. She then says what is really troubling for me. She boasts that she would strike foul blows against the NRA and pound the NRA into submission. You see, if the NRA has done something criminal, then you go after them. But submission is not a word that the Attorney General should be using. That is troublesome for me. She then vowed that she would use the New York Attorney General's investigative and enforcement powers. That means law enforcement agents that are going to be used to dig for information that she can then manipulate into a case. She said that the investigative and enforcement powers for the precise purpose of staunching political speech, deadly propaganda, in other words, the lawsuit states. See, this is a problem. This is a problem. This is reflective of everything that is occurring in this nation right now, in that politicians are using the power of law enforcement and the legal system to get people to submit. That is the key takeaway from all this. Whether it's what Wolf is saying and the lack of action that he's actually presenting with DHS, he is allowing the left to literally pressure the people into submitting and creating this false image that if law enforcement reacts the way that they should, if these people have lasers out there trying to burn the eyeballs out of police officers, they should be shot and killed. It's no different than if they were 5 feet away from them with a knife carving their eyes out. There's no difference. They just happen to be 30, 40 yards away, 50 yards away. But if they can hit them in the eyes, they can burn their eyes to the point where they're blind. They should be shot. And I will stand by that statement. Okay, I am somebody who every single time I stepped out of the office, whether to do surveillance or even woke up in the morning, I always went over the use of deadly force policy in my brain. The biggest thing about it, imminent threat of loss of life or serious bodily injury. And what's occurring in Portland is serious bodily injury. And in some cases, death. The potential for death, and actually death in other places. They need to start reacting to those protesters the same way that they would if they came up on some guy in Compton, out in LA or in East New York, and the guy had injured with a slingshot and almost killed a cop. They would shoot and kill that guy. Or if he had a laser and was burning the eyes out of people as they approached, they would shoot and kill that guy. They need to react the same exact way when it comes to these rioters. And the fact that they're trying to overthrow the government. But when you see what the Attorney General in New York, what she's doing, and the Attorney General in Washington, D.C., she said it herself. They're going to use a full force of the law and the legal system and law enforcement to get them to submit. So there is your takeaway for the show. It doesn't matter if it's Christopher Wray, director of the FBI, or Chad Wolf, Secretary of Homeland Security. What they are doing, their lack of action against the left and these rioters, it doesn't matter what agency they're with or if it's a state or city agency. The fact is, law enforcement is giving the power to the rioters, the power to the people who are causing havoc in these cities. And when we look at the Attorney General of New York and what she said about the NRA, that she is going to use every bit of power in the New York legal system and in law enforcement to get the NRA to submit, well, there you have it, folks. Some of these leftists move fast, some of them move slow, but the purpose is to get you to submit. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. Never submit. The truth has arrived. Peace, and we're out of here.